for Zaitsev. Up ahead for Marleau, in on Nurse. Patrick Marleau spins it around and shoots. Brossoit makes the save. Nurse lost his helmet. Rebound.
Oh.
Fired home by
You're an idiot.
Kadri. Toronto leads
No.
5-4.
This is unbelievable.
That wasn't Kadri.
Chris Russell shoots this into his own net. Watch Russell spin to clear the puck, and he drills it through the legs of Brossoit.
You are an idiot.
Oh my goodness. 5-4, a
Jesus
minute 5
Christ.
left. I think this
Never
will
gonna
be
catch a break.
Marleau's goal.
Oh my God. So, what the heck is going on with the Edmonton Oilers? Can we talk about that for a minute? This team, I don't understand how they have so many draft picks over the last 10 years, and they've pulled so many names that have never really worked out other than last year. We finally thought we had something last year. McDavid comes back, the second coming that we've heard so many times about when they picked Taylor Hall and when they picked Nail Yakupov and when they picked Nugent Hopkins. We heard about these great players that were going to come and make a difference, and maybe McDavid so far looks like the best, but was last year a flash in the pan? I mean, how do you get all the way back to the playoffs and put your team on your back like that? And then they give the kid a ton of money, which, by the way, is going to kick in next year. And now they're just, I think they've got 10 years, 10 wins on the year, I think. All right, look, so we're about 25 games into the season. If you've been listening to the show, obviously we don't talk a lot about what's going on standings-wise very early in the season because it really doesn't matter until you get to about December, because now all of a sudden this stuff starts to matter. Edmonton right now is second to last, only ahead of Arizona in their own division, and probably one of the worst teams in the league, short of maybe, obviously, the Coyotes, Buffalo, and I guess the Flyers right now. But how do you have a team... So let's roll this back a little bit. In 2006, Edmonton makes it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they lose to the Hurricane, I believe in a Game 7, if I remember that correctly. It doesn't say what I'm looking at, but I'm pretty sure it was a Game 7. When you look at the record before that, I mean, they hadn't been dominant, obviously, since Gretzky left the team in the late 80s, but they at least contended. They were in the playoffs occasionally. They had a stretch of about 5 or 6 years in the mid to late 90s when they were at least in the playoffs, when they were contending. They were an interesting team. They hit 2006, they make the finals, they lose, and then something kind of happens, and they just become the basement team of the NHL. Whether you believe tanking or not, it's happening in kind of the mid to late 2000s after that run. They get a couple first-round picks. If you go back and look at the names that team has picked since around that time when they were coming up, right, 2005, 2004, they've got names like Devin Dubnyk, Andrew Cogliano, Sam Gagner, Jordan Eberle, Magnus Paajarvi, Taylor Hall, right, Nugent Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, obviously, Leon Draisaitl, and then, of course, Connor McDavid. Now, most of those players obviously aren't with the team anymore. Most of those players didn't really pan out the way that they thought they did, but most of them were very, very good, if not serviceable players, except for maybe Nail Yakupov. But between all of these picks and between the 5 or 6 coaches, 7 coaches I think they've had since 2009, they can't put anything together. Now, they've got a GM in Peter Chiarelli who likes to just throw money at anything that scores a goal once, put themselves in such a situation where they're going to have they'll have no cap space to do anything with, and you've got a defensive core that is as soft as dog poo. I know Nurse and obviously Adam Larson, who just got hurt the other night, have been doing serviceable jobs, but you can't win in this league just by picking up a couple young, really fast players and score goals. It's been proven over and over again. There is still too much defense, and the goaltending has gotten way too good. You can't do it that way. I don't understand why they haven't figured it out. You get a couple first-round picks, I understand. You're going to grab that flashy player. You're going to grab that player that you think is going to score the next 50-goal scorer in a few years of development. I understand that. But when you do it over and over and over again, between the 2010 draft and the 2015 draft, they had 4 number 1 overall picks. 4. That, of course, being Taylor Hall, Nugent Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, that hasn't really turned into anything, and then, of course, Connor McDavid in 2015. Have they not figured out that they need to start moving pieces to get defense? If they can't find an elite goaltender that's going to change the world of goaltending, which is not going to happen and not something you can count on, they need defense, and I don't understand why they won't move that way. It's been 10 years. They have proven that just trying to score a billion goals does not work because the league is too strong, and even the worst teams in the league do not get 7-8 goals put up against them on a nightly basis. It happens, but it does not happen on a regular basis. You cannot run a team like that. I'm not an expert, and this is something that we say all the time if you regularly listen to the show, but that's the most obvious takeaway from this is why do they not focus on defense? They hire Peter Chiarelli, who gets ousted in Boston for throwing money in bad contracts at old players because they're fan favorites and because they win a cup in Boston. Now he feels like he has to pay them. So the Bruins are going through, or are just getting out of the problem of having too much money wrapped up into players that are not even on the ice anymore. And now he's in Edmonton with the second coming, which looks like he may be, and throws a ton of money at him. Right now, the Oilers, I believe, have somewhere between 9 and 10 million left in cap space, and they just paid Connor McDavid $12.7 or $12.8 million a year, which is going to start next year. So they're in a situation where they're not going to be able to pay any defensemen unless they start cutting people out. They gave a ton of money to Draisaitl. They gave a ton of money to McDavid, and I'm not saying that's not deserved, but you need to start looking at the fact that you've done this with Taylor Hall. You've done this with Jordan Eberle. You've done this with Nugent Hopkins, who's had some off years, and it didn't work. So unless McDavid is going to carry every person on this team for the rest of his career, it's also not gonna work. You look at those best teams. You look at the Penguins right now that everybody hates. And Sidney Crosby, right? Sidney Crosby is the greatest player on earth probably right now, as of today, or at least in the last 5 years. He still has a team around him. He cannot win by himself. He has a defensive core. He has been very lucky to have strong goalies that they keep finding in Pittsburgh. Edmonton either has a developmental problem. When they draft these kids, they're just throwing them on the ice because they got nothing going for them and say, go score a bunch of goals for me, kid. And obviously it stunts a ton of them. Or they are blind. I have no idea what they're doing. It's infuriating. If you listen to the show enough, you know that coming out of me, this is kind of a weird thing. I pay attention, obviously, to a lot of hockey and a lot of teams that are not my home team. Everybody does know that I am a big USA hockey fan, so I've said many times in the show, and we'll continue that. If a Canadian team never wins the Stanley Cup again, I would get a giant kick out of that. But if one is going to do it, why can't it be one of the smaller teams? I would love to see Edmonton win a cup. I would love to see even Calgary, not that I care too much about them. But please don't let Montreal or even Toronto, and Toronto's probably the closest team to it right now, right? And last year we thought it was Edmonton with Toronto hot on their heels, and now it just looks like Edmonton's they have no idea what's going on. It is early in the season. They do have a couple small injuries. I know Talbot's got hurt about a week ago. Adam Larson obviously just went down last night, or the other night, as I spit all over my mic. They can turn this around. They're not so far in the hole, but every day that passes that they don't get their act together, this is just going to get harder and harder. Fans in Edmonton have got to be getting sick of it. Now, obviously, I live in a different country and on the other side of that country, so I don't know very many hardcore Oilers fans, but I'd love to hear what you think. So leave in the comments below what you think is going on. If you think I'm crazy, if you agree with me, and or you can just vent. You can just go ahead, vent. I know you need to do it. You're an Oilers fan. You need to do it. Go ahead.